I want to cordially welcome you here on stage. And first round will be that you briefly tell us what we should know about you and what your initial thoughts are about digital identity connected with who you are and where you are. So I think it's a good idea to start with Padmina, actually, Dr. Padmina Pillai.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So I'm a scientist. My PhD is in immunology, and I'm doing my postdoc right now at MIT in biomedical engineering. So I'm an immunoengineer. So by training, I think about the immune system. I think about cancer, infection, and inflammation. And why I am here right now, I'm interested in two main ideas. One is the way in which digital identity can empower those without a voice and those who are vulnerable, with the goal of improving access to healthcare and for the development of better therapeutics. On a completely different note, and from a more from my other passions, which are music and food, I'm also interested in the ways in which voice and vibration and taste and smell and other sensory experiences can affect the immune system, and how digital nudging can be used to treat immunologic disease.
Okay, so is it fair to remember about your initial thoughts that it's about nudging, the senses that have an influence on your physical well-being? That's your second topic, and the first topic is about giving a voice to the people whom you want to take care of as immunologists.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. Very good. So to make it interesting, I will not hand it over to Sandra now. It would be too simple. I go over to David Opio and ask him the same questions. What should we know about you, and what are your initial thoughts about digital identity?
Thank you so much. I'm very, very happy to be here. Actually, this is my second time to come to Berlin. It's such an exciting moment. But for today in particular, I'm very happy to meet all of you, and I'm looking forward to connect and build lasting relationships. So I'm from Uganda. It's known as the Pearl of Africa. For those who have been there, you have your own story. I'm from two fields. One is finance. So I build financial models. The other part is technology. So I have fused the two worlds to build core banking systems to help the bottom of the pyramid population have access to finance. And I've been working on that for the last 6 years. My first company has enabled more than 1 million rural farmers in Uganda to have access to financial services. For me, digital identity is an enabler. It's something that brings on board seamless integration, and of course, it opens doors for the bottom of the pyramid populations to have access to basic needs. So, in particular, which is in a very special way, we are working to digitalize refugees in Uganda, and you're looking for 1.4 million refugees in Uganda who do not have seamless digital identities. So it has been really, it's a very profound experience to be part of this project, to help people who have been forcefully depressed from their own countries into a new environment, and using digital identity to give them a new beginning to have access to basic needs. Thank you.
Good to have you here. Is it your first time in Berlin, or how often are you here?
This is my second time.
Are you working on a global level, or what does your work look like? Is it mostly based in Uganda, or do you need to be all over the place?
Yeah, so currently we are consolidating this idea in Uganda. So we are starting with one refugee camp. It's called Bidibidi. And the government has entrusted us to look into other refugee camps. So the idea is to build a robust database, through which digital identities of these individual refugees can be, accessed and shared across the different service providers. But also we are looking into pitching the same concept to to other governments in East Africa. So from Uganda, we want to build a very successful store around digital identity and push this into other governments, Kenya, Rwanda, and of course, across Africa and other countries.
So what's the best shortcut for the phrasing it in 2 words? Would it be a refugee ID or a digital ID for everybody?
So for now, it is a digital identity for refugees. Of course, in my country, over 80% of the population are farmers, and they don't have a recognized ID, right? So we are hoping to scale. So we are using the refugee as a case study because it is really urgent for them to have these infrastructures in place and have access to basic services. But also we are looking into other bottom of the pyramid persons. So yeah, there is a possibility to scale this idea. Yeah.
So now we want to know who's that woman in the white suit, as Monica Lewinsky said, and we pass on the microphone.
Hi, everyone. So the woman in the white suit is Catherine Mahugu. I am an entrepreneur from Kenya and a champion for the new economy and an ambassador for the digital economy. My initial thoughts about just digital identity was trying to recall when was my birth of my digital identity. And I was trying to recall, and I just don't have, probably I'd say maybe, I just don't have like a specific date on when I had like my first birth. But I feel right now we're at the infancy stages of the digital human transformation. And it's an exciting time to be in, especially from the context of where I come from in Kenya and just as a whole Africa. When people talk about digital inclusion or the 1.5 billion people who don't have a form of identity, majority of them are in emerging markets or in the developing world. So what I'm trying to do as an entrepreneur and in my venture, which is known as Chiswara, and Chiswara is an agri-tech venture that provides a more equitable coffee experience for both coffee farmers and consumers alike. And right now we're using technology to leverage that by providing an inclusive and sustainable coffee supply chain. But also just in light with the theme of this event is taking it to the next level. When people say that you're purchasing coffee and you're having an impact on the ground, how can you validate that? How can you validate that the coffee that you purchase has a direct impact on the coffee farmer based in the central province in Kenya? So using emerging technologies such as blockchain and merging that with digital identity, when you're able to now purchase just our coffee, we'll be able to now tell you that this coffee has come from this region and providing traceability and provenance of the coffee that you're drinking. And also at the end of the day, if you really like the coffee, you're able to tip the coffee farmer using technologies such as blockchain. And also now being able to validate that without having me or the company being like as a middle person to do that. So that's how I envision just applying digital identity as well, and just my thoughts on digital identity.
So that sounds very much like a hybrid approach, right? To enhance things that have always happened, maybe not in the best form, by digital means, that they happen in a better form. So as you know, Europe discusses, and then North America discusses a lot about batteries, China as well, and where the lithium comes from. That would be also interesting, not only to know where the coffee bean comes from, but where the where the ingredients for the batteries come from, with a lot of pollution for the environment and so on. So you see, you get my synapses going already with your input. So thank you very much for that. Now, you also touched the point a little bit about the future of work in general. Would that theme be too broad for this event which we have ahead of us, or should we focus on the hybrid approach of enhancing the value chain, what happens in the world with digital means?
I feel just the fact that we have like such a diverse group of people, and the aim of the event is to have an impact on millions of people in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think the best thing is to have like a broad approach of the future of jobs. How does that look like? Yeah. How does AI affect a number of the industries or the jobs that we're doing, and also seeing how we can now do a deep dive and see how does it affect different sectors. How does it affect supply chain? How does it affect just any industry as well? So I feel probably starting with the top approach of how the future of job looks like, and then now drilling down to its effects would be a good approach.
Affect what exists and create what doesn't exist yet. What will be what will be stronger in your eyes? Will there be the dominant part of what happens through digital means, through digital identity? Will it be more creating new things that haven't been here before, or changing existing things and putting people out of work, as we saw through outsourcing, and the jobs have been done in Bangladesh, which have been done in the United Kingdom before?
I feel that with just the future of jobs, like a number of jobs will disappear. A number of jobs will also appear, and some jobs have to evolve so that we stay relevant. I remember I was reading recently that majority of students right now are the jobs that they're probably going to work for have not even been, developed or are not actually existent. So I think also it's just trying to understand what are the skill sets that we need to have to do that, just to be prepared for the future.
Good, thank you very much. Now we can choose Ari or Sandra. You've been waiting again and again that it's your turn, so Sandra, it's your turn now. So it's Sandra Matz, actually Professor Sandra Matz. Welcome here. And what should we know about you?
Well, thank you. I'm glad I finally get to speak. I'm getting super nervous. So I've actually been to Berlin a couple of times. I grew up in the southwest corner of Germany, so I was born and raised here, and now live in New York. I'm a professor of psychology and business, so my background is in psychology, and then at some point I got really interested in data, in predictive technology, machine learning. So the research I do with my team, it's not just me, is looking at the parts of our subjective identity, our self, the things that we really believe define us, make us uniquely ourselves, such as personality, emotions, like health, well-being, how all these parts of our identity can now be predicted from digital traces. So it's if you were to put it in a nutshell, it's kind of the science behind what happened in Cambridge Analytica, looking at what does it mean that I can now predict that you're an extrovert from your GPS signal, from your Facebook, from your credit card spending? What does it do to our society? How does that help us to influence your behavior? And as a psychologist, it's super exciting because it really means that we can understand people's daily behavior in a very fine-grained level, but also at scale. Now, at the same time as a user, super creepy and scary to some extent. So I'm really spending a lot of time thinking about, obviously, the challenges that's posing in terms of regulation, like education. But I think most people would potentially call me a somewhat naive optimist, in the sense that I really believe there's so much opportunity there if we think about ways in which we can use data and predictive technology for good. And also here at the World Frontiers Forum, I think to some extent you probably have to be a little bit naive to drive change. So that is my background.
Drive change, make things stay. It's about privacy, obviously, your topic, and when you described your background yesterday, when we prepared, you also described very well how social control functioned actually way back in the society, which it still does in a smaller group that are not so open and not so shaped by migration as Berlin is. Now, privacy is something which might not even be as old as we all think, and maybe, I don't know, does it need to be defended? You even said, maybe it goes away entirely. From which perspective would you come? Are you more coming from there is something which is more like a human right that needs to be defended, or is there something evolving, or a facet in between which is just not here yet?
I mean, that's a question that I've been struggling with for years now, so this is also why I'm here. Would love to hear your input at some point. I think the way that I've recently started thinking about it is, so I grew up in a tiny village, 500 people, like everybody knew everything about everybody else. They knew who I was dating, like what my goals were in life, what I kind of like, what I don't like. So, and it, to some extent, it obviously was invading my privacy. It just felt like I'm a bit naked in this village, but also there was like a lot of positive stuff about it, right? It kind of gives you the sense of protection. It gives you the sense of there's someone who really understands you and who's really in a position potentially to give advice. And I think like as we move from small villages to big cities to the internet, a lot of this has gone lost on the way. So instead of being Sandra, it's like I'm just a number in the system, and I do think that there's a lot of positive aspects of giving up parts of your privacy in return for something that either is helpful in terms of advice or that makes you feel part of a bigger collective where you're not just a number. So I'm somewhere in between, I would say.
All right, good. So work to be done or thoughts to be had. Yeah. Ari, now we're up to you. Ari Sokolov. Very welcome. What should we know about you?
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, some friends and I in high school decided to address the problem of mental health issues in the LGBTQ+ teen community. And when we went into that community and found that a lot of these issues were rooted in feeling isolated and alone, we wanted to create an online platform where no one would feel isolated and alone, and subsequently allow anyone to freely express themselves. So that kind of started my journey with Trill, and since then we've acquired about 50,000 users in about a year in 42 countries, and they come from all different backgrounds, all levels of freedom and ability to express their true selves and feel comfortable with that. So it's just been a really cool environment to see kind of how these digital identities have formed within a place that's a really positive anonymous environment, and kind of seeing how this digital culture has formed to kind of allow people to be able to really express their true selves that wouldn't be seen on other corners of the internet. So that's kind of where my intersection of digital identity kind of collides, and we started Trill with the premise of creating a safe space online where everyone feels like they belong, and kind of, I guess with digital identity, that just kind of circles back into wanting to create digital identity architectures that really foster that.
You're coming from Los Angeles, right? And that's where the initiative started. How is it with starting international activities out of Los Angeles? What's the view of the rest of the world? Is it more the view of the New Yorker, right? After, I don't know, 9th Street, basically wilderness starts, or how's it from a...
Yeah, so we pretty much started by interviewing teens in our community that were specifically LGBTQ+, and found that even though we lived in Los Angeles, which is a pretty liberal environment, we still had a lot of teens that still had the issue of being able to truly express their true selves. And then we kind of polled and got a lot of our initial users from the larger internet. So we posted on Tumblr about our idea for the concept. I got 15,000 reblogs from pretty much all over the world. Although we're still only in English and a lot of our population is in the US, it's been really great to kind of see how the internet in general has brought a global audience to the platform, and kind of the essence of being able to kind of create your own digital identity that doesn't necessarily follow you throughout the rest of the internet has kind of resonated across country lines.
So is it fair to pinpoint your topic as to include the marginalized in the digital participation and give them digital identity, which is something that's reflected in David's work, and that brings us back to Padmina, which is also a theme, and giving the people you actually try to find treatment for a voice is something which is very relevant for your approach. Now, in the second run through, I would like to do the following, because today we basically support these pioneers to evolve their topics. Tomorrow we expand them, and after Sunday, we just go apart, but still we hope that something is lasting. Now, what type of support would you wish for today's session to your topic? What's your ask? What's your ask to this round? What's your expectation? What should happen? And I would like to start with Padmina again.
Thanks. So since I have two topics that I'd like to focus on, so one being how digital identity can empower those without a voice to both help us get access to quality healthcare for them, but also to actually develop better therapeutics for them. I'd like to, I know there are many other people in the room who know much more about digital identity than I do, who are in the healthcare industry, so I'd like more conversations about what are the obstacles to achieving this, and how can we overcome them, and how do we also receive the data that we get from these people in a respectful manner to really expand our collective identity. And then in terms of my other project, I think all of us come from many different cultures, and most cultures have forms of rhythm, of chanting, of meditation, of choral singing. I think lots of us here love food. And so I think that these are all sensory experiences that we know have an impact on how we think and have an impact on how we feel. We are starting to figure out mechanisms of how the sensory experience can affect our brain and the neurological effects. We're also starting to figure out how the nervous system and the immune system communicate. So we know how stresses in the brain can suppress the immune system, right? And how that can prevent us from fighting infection. And we know how the immune system can also communicate back to the brain. I think some people mentioned earlier how the microbiota, changes in your microbiota can actually determine how you respond to fear, right? So we know how these different systems kind of play with each other, but imagine if we could connect them all together. So imagine if you could have some sort of external device, or imagine if we could gauge what's happening in the immune system, but also be able to treat immunological disease just using AI-based approaches and digital nudging. And so I'd love to brainstorm on both of these ideas and see who has interest in developing both of them.
Good, and we'll see how the sub-Saharan lunch signals back to all of our brains then later on. What's your ask to participants of your workshop then later on?
Yes, so for me personally, I'm kind of asking for, systems and approaches, we can adapt into our digital identity architecture to build, sustainable and secure, protocol through which the data of this refugee can be shared with service providers. And the other one is about what kind of, conversations should we really have with different governments to uptake this solution into their different, refugee camps. So it's really about the question of sustainability and scaling this solution from one country to the other. So how do we integrate this seamlessly in different economies?
Thanks, David. Kate, what are you hoping for?
One is just knowledge sharing, trying to understand how digital identity for development has worked in various countries, companies, or communities. Two is also just trying to understand how to leverage digital identity for women, women empowerment, especially in the rural areas. Majority of the vulnerable groups who don't have access to identity are women and children. And three, which is very important, is I'm asking the community to have fun. So yeah, enjoy the moment.
Super, very good. Ari, Sandra?
I think my big question is, again, going back to the research I do, like how do we manage it? How do we manage predictive technologies that have a lot of opportunities but also challenges? Who's responsible? Is it regulators, businesses, users? And also how do we do that in a way that actually reduces some of the inequality that we see in terms of if very few people who understand, develop, use these technologies, benefit from them, and the vast majority of people just being the target of it. So I'm really here to, I guess, collect answers to some of my questions and hopefully also more questions. So if you have great ideas, I'm here to steal them. I'll give you credit, but that's my hope.
The questions that I'm specifically interested in exploring here are how might we create a digital identity architecture that really elevates the voices of marginalized communities? How might we cultivate a digital culture that promotes authenticity and communities of trust online? And also, how might we cultivate digital rights that ultimately promote and freedom, but also are cognizant of what the potential negative effects are? I think that answering all these questions will be really meaningful to my work and just really fascinating to explore.
All right, pioneers, thank you very much. You have been planted.